4 million people on the verge of losing their citizenship. The Indian state of Assam has published a list to identify who belongs and who doesn't. Will those residents be deported? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Assam's National Register of Citizens. In 1971, millions of people fled to India after Bangladesh declared independence from Pakistan. Many of those migrants settled in the state of Assam. But for decades, there's been a growing push to get them deported. And now the government seems to have taken a step toward that end. The state has released its list of citizens, people who can prove they came to Assam before 1971. But 4 million residents have been excluded. So what comes next for them? The government says the process is necessary to identify illegal Bangladeshi migrants and that no one will be deported immediately. But the move has sparked fears of a threat against Assam's ethnic minorities. Haider Abbasi has more.
For most of these people, this is the only home they've known. They've lived in India's northern state of Assam for decades. But now, along with millions of others, they could be forced to leave. India considers them to be illegal immigrants. On Monday, the government published a list of people living in Assam who it says are citizens. 4 million names were excluded.
This figure is very high figure. It is very surprising. It is unbelievable because there is no such number of illegal infiltrators in Assam.
Those who aren't on the list fear they'll be arrested or deported. India's government says this won't happen immediately.
Every person will have the opportunity to appeal or file an objection. There is a provision for this in the law. Everyone will have a chance to have their case heard.
So why was this census carried out? And why in Assam? Bangladesh used to be East Pakistan, but it declared independence in 1971, triggering a war. Millions fled to India, and many found refuge in the state of Assam. The government says anyone who came to Assam after the war is not a citizen of India, despite some having documents proving they are. Abu Tahrir says his ancestors came to Assam in 1913. His grandfather was the state's first deputy speaker. Yet he and 50 members of his family have been told they're now living there illegally.
I feel extremely ashamed and upset. They think we're not Indians. I don't feel like living here. It's much better to die. This indignity is unfair.
Assam has a history of hostility towards immigrants. Indigenous residents accuse them of stealing their jobs and resources. For decades, the All Assam Students' Union has been calling for them to be expelled.
Core issue is to protect the language, culture and identity of the indigenous people of Assam. We cannot live like a second-class citizen due to influx of illegal foreigners.
These tensions reached a climax in 1983, when around 2,000 Muslim settlers were massacred in one day. Assam's Muslim population is now 40%. That's an increase of 10% since 1971. Activists say the Muslim community is being deliberately targeted to appease Hindu nationalists and the state's indigenous residents. But the situation in Assam is not unique. Under the BJP government, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, 15,000 people were last year declared illegal aliens in India. So what's next for the 4 million people in Assam who could soon be rendered stateless? And is the ruling BJP pandering to Hindu nationalists ahead of elections next year? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
To discuss this further, I'm joined now from Jammu by Arun Kumar Gupta. He is a state spokesman for India's ruling party, the BJP. In Barpeta, Assam, we have Abdul Kalam Azad. He is a researcher working with the people affected by the NRC list. And in Mumbai, we have journalist Rana Ayub. Thanks all so much for joining us. Rana, let me begin with you. What do you think this is really all about? I mean, some supporters of the National Register say there is a need to protect the culture of Assam state that illegal immigrants are disrupting. Others, of course, say this is just outright xenophobia. What's your interpretation?
Well, the manner in which this has been done, I mean, you have 4 million people who are disenfranchised overnight. I mean, this is, it reeks of xenophobia because, you know, the way the opposite, the ruling party of India, the kind of language that it has been using for these people, Bangladeshi infiltrators, there is no definition yet I mean, about who is a migrant in the situation. These are people who have been staying in Bangladesh for generations at a stretch. As reports are coming in, there are families of army men who have served in India. Their names are being left out. The former president of India, his kin have been left out in the list. So it's a very arbitrary list. There has been, you know, you do not have any definition for who the people are, who are the people who you want to have left out in the process. Also, we have to understand that we are approaching election year. The president of the ruling party also wants to ape this mechanism in neighboring states, creating this shrill narrative of nationalism, us versus them. In a way, also covertly targeting the minorities because it's playing this card that the majority of the people, you know, who are illegal migrants also happen to be from the minority communities. It's playing all these cards well. It does not seem like an attempt to weed out people who do not belong there, but also an attempt to kind of create us versus them. Also, the process, there has been no mechanism. It's so arbitrary. You don't know where will these people go, whether they will be deported, whether they will be detained, whether they will be sent back to Bangladesh. Bangladesh has clearly disowned them. So where will these people go? There is no moral compass which has been displayed here.
Okay, let me ask Arun Kumar Gupta, how does the BJP justify this?
I would like to start that, you know, this process has started in the country. But may I ask you that are we the only country in the world who are trying to talk about illegal immigrants? Are we the only country in the world who are trying to say that
let's focus on
people,
India right now.
You know, who do not belong to that country? Now, what I'm trying to say, please understand that every country in the globe, they are trying to talk about illegal immigrants, irrespective who they are, and they want them to go back to their original countries, you know, whether it's the United States, whether it's United Kingdom, or any country for that matter. So are we doing something which nobody has done till date? No, I mean, this is a process, you know, which we the government has started identifying the people who do not belong to here. They have a system of doing appeal, and then it's a long process.
Okay.
But what am I trying to say, that why a different color is being given to these kind of things, which are the normal government processes?
Okay, Abdul Kalam Azad, let me ask you that. This is just a normal government process that every other country engages in, so what's the problem?
See, the problem is that in Assam, you know, the interesting fact is that many Muslim people, Muslim community, even the Bengali Hindus also supported the NRC when it started, because the consensus was based on this fact that these minorities, irrespective of being Muslim or Bengali Hindu, they have been persecuted for a long time in the name of doubtful voters, in the name of suspected illegal immigrants. So they, you know, decided that if we get the NRC at least for once and all, the problem of these people, which, you know, this will put an end. But what happened actually? Once the process started, you know, there have been some exclusionary and discriminatory provisions. I will tell you simply two examples here. You know, when the entire population of the Assam, in the media, you will get to know that they applied for the citizenship. But the fact of the matter is that 12 million people, there was a provision of OI, or original inhabitants. Under this provision, as many as 12 million people have been given some sort of free hand without providing any kind of documents. Their name have been included. But on the other hand, the Muslims and the Bengali Hindus, they are also marginalized. Their socio-economic condition is very poor, but they have been forced to go through this, you know, a very stringent verification process.
So just the process itself logistically puts a huge burden on the people who have the fewest resources to deal with it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, see, you know, the question is that when even if you see the documents which are asking by the NRC authorities, you know, they are asking for documents of 1971, 51. Many of those documents are not even available with the government.
Okay.
In
Let me ask Rana, though, because one of the arguments of the BJP is that they're not kicking anybody out. This is just the first part of this process, and there is now the chance to appeal. If you're on that list of 4 million, it should be no problem. You should somehow be able to prove that there was a mistake. You shouldn't be on this register, and you'll be fine. Why don't you trust the appeals process?
To begin with, I'll just quickly react to what the BJP spokesperson said. It happens globally. I mean, separating a child from the parents is morally wrong if it's happening in America, if it's happening in Bangladesh, if it's happening in India. So that is something I think the BJP should understand. The second point, you are dealing with a population in Assam, which we are looking to disenfranchise, which struggles every day to put its 3 meals together, which is not educated, which are living in perhaps the poorest of the poor circumstances. Where will they get the apparatus to put together their documents? I mean, you are giving them a very short window to get together all the documents, get together the procedures. Many of them are not even well versed with the procedures. So where is the mechanism, and who do they appeal? Indian courts are already full with maximum cases, which are a lot more important. This will just keep dragging on. Plus, there are officials in the Indian government who have already made a statement that those people who have been left out will not be allowed to vote in the upcoming elections. So are you going to not allow 4 million people from voting in the procedure? There's no clarity. It's perhaps the most confused procedure that has happened so far.
Okay, Arun Kumar
and the
Gupta.
rhetoric around it, and the communal rhetoric that has been spun around this entire procedure, I think that makes matters worse.
Okay, Mr. Gupta, I will let you respond. Go ahead.
I'm extremely sorry to say, that the way the color is being given to this whole government exercise is something which should not be seen that way. Please understand, and again I'm repeating, that is Indian government doing something which nobody else has done any part of the world? Is Indian government doing something which is not required to be done?
I think Rana was arguing, though, that India has fewer resources to deal with this.
Not naming ABC.
You have to admit, though, Mr. Gupta, that India already.
My point is that India has huge population.
Right.
We cannot afford these kind of burdens, unnecessary burden. And if I take back you to the history, there has been long agitation in Assam for all these things. Please understand, there is the local inhabitants of the place. They are the one who say why our resources are being shared with the people who don't belong to here. So, but in spite of that, the government of India has made a very elaborate system in which everybody is supposed to prove their identity. That's it. I mean, there's nothing more to be seen in this,
Okay, Arun, I see you shake. I'm sorry, Abdul, I see you shaking your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a response to Mr. Arun. In which country that country would persecute its veterans, its army officials, its air force official. You see the news every day. There are stories coming that even the army officers, they have been haunted like illegal immigrants. Which country would do this?
And let me ask.
You are talking about Assam. Yeah, you are talking about Assam agitation. More than 3,000 people are killed in one day.
No, you have to talk about all foreign countries, man. You look at United States, you look at United Kingdom, you look at Germany, France, Australia. Every country has not appreciated illegal immigrations in the country.
It's army officials.
Okay,
but Air Force officials. It's police officer. One police officer was in the duty of protecting and providing security to the chief minister. He was been, doubted to be an illegal immigrant.
You are only talking specifics. Please understand, we are discussing the subject. We are not talking about specific 1 to 4% what you're talking. We are just talking on a subject whether the action what is being initiated is the action right or not. We are trying to say this action has only been initiated. There's a long way to go.
You're talking over each other actually, and it's very difficult to understand either of you right now. So let me get back to a point here. Mr. Gupta, India. You're saying India is just doing the same as every other country on the planet right now, but India has some very specific issues and challenges that countries like the United States and Germany, for example, do not have. A number of Indians have been born without even being issued birth certificates. You're asking them to provide documents that are very difficult for them to suddenly come up with. So these are very specific issues. Also, I need to ask you, if you render them stateless, because these people have been born, many of them born in the country, where do you expect them to go?
No, but please appreciate that you're talking about the countries who do not have these specific issue. In spite of the fact they don't have, still they are active. In spite of the fact they may not have these kind of complicated issues, still they're very active and they want the illegal immigrants to be deported back. And they are deporting day in and day out. But as far as India is concerned, we are a largely populated country. We definitely cannot afford these things. But again, I'm trying to say that before we come to a conclusion and we come to a final saying that this is happening, we have a process to follow. This only NCR has been made where a lot of impartial working has done. Impartial working has gone into the place, and people have been identified who are there now. Now let them prove. You know what you're saying. People are born here. You're saying people are born here. They have born and brought up here. Fine, that could be one of the justifications of their being there. But that does not mean the government should stop working just because a section of people are not appreciating that. So I'm not naming anybody ABC. We are just trying to say that this is not something which needs agitation. This is something we need to understand, that every country under the sun globally cannot afford illegal immigration, come what may.
Okay, Abdul, let me ask you though, could this process of getting rid of these illegal immigrants that Arun Gupta is saying India really can't even afford to host, it's possible that that process will be even more burdensome on the Indian government, given he's saying they're doing this properly with justified appeals processes and help that these 4 million people will get.
I will give you the, I will try to explain what is actually going to happen. You have these 4 million people, and government is providing 1 month window to, file their claim and objection. Not only this 4 million people of, applying for the claim under the claim category. There are categories, in this form there are hundreds of, spelling mistakes and all. There will be objection also. There will be rectification, and you have only 1 month time. How does these people will get their documents? How they will apply? Why? If you are saying that this process, if you have a process, then the process should be streamlined. How this sort of banality can happen?
Okay. Rana, let me ask you.
I'd like to raise another simple point. I went to one village. In Assam there are more than 2,000 villages which are not villages. These are river island. In those places, people are living. They are fighting with flood and erosion. I went there day before yesterday. In entire village, in each and every household, 2 or 3 members have been included in the list, and the remaining are outside the list. What kind of process is going on? How you can declare someone as an Indian citizen in the same family, 2-3 people are being excluded?
Okay.
What sort of arbitrary is going on?
Let me
only to inflate the number.
I just need to get some final thoughts then from Rana Ayub. I mean, how does this get solved, or can we expect it to get even more complicated and confrontational from here on out?
But it's going to get more confrontational, more complicated, because the ruling party has made it more political and communal, when instead of solving the issue in Assam, it is now talking about doing an NCR for neighboring states for political benefits. And the bottom line is that this is not about who is illegal, who is legal. This is about who is privileged and who is underprivileged. So the privileged might just bribe their way up, create certificates and get their way up. But it is the poor who do not have the resources who will be left behind. Assam is also the state which witnessed the infamous Nelly massacre in 1983, wherein 2,000 people were killed over this very issue. The government has opened a Pandora's box, and you don't know where it's going to end. This is not going to be a pleasant issue, and it's only going to get worse and complicated.
Arun Kumar Gupta, is the BJP then, as is accused, pandering to Hindu nationalists?
Yeah. I humbly would beg to differ what my panelists are saying. Please understand that at this stage, when the process has just started, I mean, giving this a biased opinion and giving a biased angle to this and color is not appreciated at all. Let's see how things are going. But again, let me once again clarify. Please understand that nothing is being done to marginalize anybody ABC, because this is not something which governments do. The governments don't work on these parameters. Government have a very specific, and they want to work on something which suits their country's interest, you know. So looking into all those things, let's not come to a biased, preempted, opinions, and getting a biased opinion and giving a color which is really not good. Okay?
Okay. Abdul, I'll let you get some final words in.
I would request Mr. Varun to come down to Assam, forget about the Muslims, you go to the Barak Valley where most of this, the victims are Bengali Hindu, talk to them, you will get to know what kind of persecution is going on. 102 years old person, he's a Hindu. He was detained in detention center. What? Yeah.
Okay. We have a slightly more time, and so I wanted to get to Rana.
I mean, if you are talking about specific, please, if you are talking about specifics, please understand that these kind of discussions and debates don't end with the specifics. We are talking on a subject, and subject is loud and clear, that whatever any government under the sun globally is doing, any government for that matter, are they doing wrong? Rest all governments are doing wrong? In case all other governments in the world are doing wrong, then we can have another debate on it, whether this is what is done in India is also wrong.
Okay,
so
Arun
let's not go.
Kumar,
give a different color to the whole debate.
Arun
we are
Kumar
talking very
Gupta.
specific, and what you are talking about a specific case about a village or something is okay. I mean, this is maybe one wrong case is there, but that does not mean the process is wrong.
Arun Kumar Gupta, I'm going to have to give you the final word. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time for this segment of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of you so much for joining us. Still to come on the Newsmakers, the U.S. releases almost $200 million in aid to Egypt, which Trump withheld over human rights abuses. So what's changed? And Congolese opposition leader Jean-Pierre Bemba returns to the DRC to file his candidacy for president. After spending the last 10 years in prison, is the former warlord still eligible to run? The United States is restoring military aid to Egypt, funds that were previously withheld, citing human rights concerns. Last year, the Trump administration denied Egypt almost $100 million in assistance and cut another $195 million until it saw improvements in the country's track record on human rights and democracy. Now, the United States has decided to allow Egypt to use the remaining funds for military procurements, saying it recognizes the steps Egypt has taken. But what are they? Many observers say the situation is only getting worse. So do these funds give the United States leverage over the Sisi government? Christine Perovolakis has that.
If actions could speak louder than words, then the U.S. has emphatically declared Egypt to have improved its human rights. Washington has restored $195 million in military aid, which it froze last year to protest against rights abuses and Egypt's dealings with North Korea.
You have a great friend and ally in the United States and in me.
President Donald Trump has wanted Egypt's president Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to end a crackdown on aid agencies and withdraw a law forbidding them to work in Egypt. Sisi is also under pressure to overturn a 2013 conviction of dozens of foreign aid workers, including 17 Americans, as well as sever its ties with North Korea. That's after UN reports that North Korea operates illegal arms sales across the Middle East from its embassy in Cairo. Egypt is the second largest recipient of U.S. military aid after Israel. It received $47 billion in military aid and another $24 billion in economic assistance over the past 4 decades. And news last year that Washington was holding back nearly $300 billion until it saw improvements on human rights came as a shock to officials. But to what extent Egyptians have met those demands isn't clear. In the 5 years since Sisi came to power, Egypt's prison population has increased considerably. According to Human Rights Watch, more than 60,000 people have been imprisoned or prosecuted in the aftermath of the coup. Many are tortured with electric shocks, beatings, and rape.
I was leaving university when I was arrested. They threw me inside the car. We went to the police station. They stripped me, blindfolded me, and cuffed my hands behind my back. They started hitting me with a wooden stick. They handcuffed me from behind and hung me from a door. My shoulders felt like they were coming out. He put pliers on my nail and pulled my nail out from its roots.
Peaceful protests are banned unless approved by the government, and the media is censored. The country's largest opposition group, the Muslim Brotherhood, is outlawed, and people suspected of membership are hunted down. More than 800 people, including former President Mohamed Morsi, have been sentenced to death. And Human Rights Watch believes that at least 29 people have been executed this year, mainly as a result of sentencing in military courts. And in the northern Sinai Peninsula, Egyptian forces have forcibly evicted tens of thousands of people as part of their fight against Daesh. Washington says it's recognized steps Egypt has taken over the last year to improve human rights and democracy. But in reality, is the country's human rights record only getting worse? Christine Pirovolakis, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Cairo is Mustafa Ragab. He is the founder of the Egyptian Association in the UK. And from Berlin, we have Amr Magdi. He is a researcher with Human Rights Watch for the Middle East and North Africa. Thanks both so much for joining us. Let me begin in Berlin. Amr, where does Egypt's human rights record stand today?
Thank you for your time. I think we are still seeing deterioration of the human rights situation in Egypt over the past 5 years. The current government, backed by the military, has been presiding over actually one of the worst human rights crises in Egypt's recent history, when it comes to any aspect of civil or political or even social rights. Public sphere is almost completely shut down. That's not just the opposition allegation or human rights organization observation, but even by close journalists who are close to President Sisi, like Ahmaduddin Hussein or Abdullah Sinawi. They are all saying the same. There is no political life. We have seen no competition, no environment for fair and free competition in the presidential elections. We are seeing thousands of people, civilians, are being referred to military persecution, and also a clear break from Egypt's history when it comes to the number of death sentences and also executions. Just from last December, we have at least 28 people executed, mostly before military courts.
Okay, Mustafa, do you concede that Egypt not only has a very poor record on human rights, but it also continues to deteriorate as we speak?
Goodness gracious, well, your guest has done his best to paint Egypt with a very, very dark picture. Obviously, Egypt is going through a very, very difficult time. And if we're going to talk about human rights, this card is always being used to put pressure on Egypt. What is happening in Egypt now during that time when people are just trying to make the government collapse and everybody's doing his best to bring Egypt down? Egypt is struggling now to keep going. And within that, I understand that there will be some victims, but not with the picture that your guests have painted it. Human rights are all over the world. I mean, in America and the UK, everywhere, when people talk about human rights, I wonder what they tell me, what they're talking about. People here have not been put to military courts. People here are exercising their rights very well. I'm in a visit to Egypt right now, and I'm walking around the streets. People are freely. People on social media are saying a lot of things that they should never say, and they should be really sentenced for what they do on social media against the government. But things are fine. Things are fine, not any less than the UK where I live. I'm visiting Egypt now and I see everybody here exercising his rights. Everybody's maybe doing more than his rights. But if people who run away from Egypt, trying to paint Egypt with this very dark picture, I say, forget it, because the people in Egypt are enjoying their life and the government are doing a great job and doing their best. And for that, forget about your human rights. And those human rights organizations been funded by other people to do this to Egypt, painted with this picture, forget it. The people in Egypt are enjoying themselves.
Okay. Amr, let me ask you, I mean, we were talking about primarily why the U.S. decided to restore its aid to Egypt. Perhaps the United States does agree with Mustafa Ragab there. And is Human Rights Watch or other aid organizations painting an unfairly negative picture of Egypt?
It's so funny to hear from the government and its supporters all the time these funny accusations about the fund and so on. They never actually go spend 5 minutes on the websites of Human Rights Watch or Amnesty or other credible organizations around the world to see our work in other parts of the world, including the United States, and how we criticize the police apparatus there, how we covered Myanmar and the cleansing of Rohingya minority, and our work on the Palestinians and so on. It's just so funny accusations, especially when we are talking about the U.S. support to Egypt. Egypt is the second biggest recipient of U.S. aid in the whole world after Israel and have received over $80 billion over 30 years. So is it just okay for the government to receive aid, but it's forbidden and a bad thing when non-government organizations receive aid from donors who want to see the world improve and want to preserve human dignity? I didn't see any substantiated claims from our guest. He's talking about walking in the street and seeing people happy, but I think we have at least 60,000 people that have been thrown in jail or persecuted on political backgrounds in the last 4 years. And we have also seen that Egypt has become the second top worst jailer of the journalists in the whole world, and this is also a clear break from Egypt history. Even under dictator Mubarak, even under President Mubarak, the crackdown on rights was not that bad. We always had a margin for freedom of expression. We always had a margin for peaceful mobilizations in the street. Tell me what was the last. Let your guest tell me when was the last anti-government protest that was not cracked down and people taken to jail or killed because they protested against the government. He's actually expressing his thoughts very clearly now. He's saying that people on social media should be taken to jail because they criticize the government. He's exactly expressing what's happening.
Okay, Mustafa, I will get to you in 1 second, but first I need to ask Amr very quickly. Why do you think then the United States did this? What does the United States actually get out of acknowledging that Egypt has improved and that they can restore aid?
Yeah. Actually, the United States didn't say that human rights in Egypt has improved. It used very vague and diplomatically worded diplomatically worded statement saying that Egypt has met some of the U.S. concerns. But these concerns are most probably regarding Egypt's relation with North Korea, not regarding human rights. And this is very, very damaging to the cause of human rights, to the sufferings of human rights activists and people who want to see Egypt improve, because when the U.S. Side in the beginning, and last year, when they withheld the aid, that they withheld it both for human rights and political concerns, and now they released the aid without any improvement of human rights, but just for maybe some improvement regarding the Egypt-North Korea relationships. This is very harming to the credibility of the U.S. when it comes to commitment to protect human rights. And it's just very self-damaging. It's like shooting themselves in the foot.
Okay, Mustafa, go ahead.
Just let me correct what he is saying there. The United States administration have committed themselves to compensate Egypt for the losses they've had in '79 when they made the peace agreement. So this is a commitment the American administration have made. When they reduce this commitment, they've actually breaking the agreement. It's a signed agreement. They have to honor the agreement they did. So when they say they watching the human rights in Egypt, please go and watch the human rights in Palestine. Please go and watch the human rights in Syria. Please go and watch these disaster areas. And instead of you Egyptians go abroad and then start to get you some funds to build some human rights organization and have you living. And of course, the more you criticize Egypt and the more you speak against Egypt, the more you get your funds. We understand all this business. Where is the human rights in Iraq? Where is the human rights in Palestine? For God's sake. And you're talking about Egypt. People in Egypt are enjoying the rights. When you say about social media, I want them to go to prison. No, people go over the top and insult and swear at officials, and that should not be allowed. That's not freedom of speech. But freedom of speech should stop with the word respect. I do not agree with anybody who go and say you should be free to do what the hell you like. No, there is a limit.
Mustafa, quickly let me ask you though.
So people,
you're saying this actually, the United States justification for restoring this aid goes back to agreements made decades ago. You can argue that, but usually no country does something for nothing. And I'm going to raise the point of what Egypt has done about the issues with North Korea. Doing some dealings in weapons, suspected weapons dealings out of...
You are actually, excuse me, you're actually raising a very, very important point. Egypt is suffering this with not just the United States, with some other countries. And that proved to me that Egypt is doing the right job. So when the American asked the Egyptian government to do something that is not for the benefit of Egypt and they don't do it, then they play with these human rights cards. And when Egypt do it because it is for our sake, then they are very friendly and they do whatever we want. This is politics. This is dirty politics, clearly. So but when we say it's human rights, they know, looking at our human rights records are just average. And through this sensitive time that Egypt is going through to control the streets, to have peace, to have this stability in the streets, then we have to be very harsh. We have to be very tough.
But did al-Sisi force North Korea, yes or no, to cut the number of diplomats at the North Korean embassy in Cairo, as media had been reporting, in order to appease the United States and get that funding back?
Obviously, we have no proof whatsoever for that. But the Americans are always asking for things, and Egypt will do it if it's for our benefit. Egypt will not do it if it's not for our benefit. And as I said, this is happening even with some friendly countries. But this is the way it goes, I'm afraid. This is politics for you. Can you imagine that Egypt is telling the Korean government what to do? I don't think so.
Okay, they can tell the Korean government what to do on their own territory. But I need to get to one last kind of wrap-up question then with you, Amr Magdi. Having the U.S. restore this aid, what kind of precedent does it set for you at Human Rights Watch?
Well, it's not a precedent, actually, because over the last decades, even during times of Mubarak and also during the last 7 years after the revolution in Egypt, we have seen different U.S. administrations using what is called national security waiver, which means that the U.S. can still go ahead and send aid and military equipments to countries like Egypt, where there are severe and grave human rights abuses, if this is in the interest of the United States. And this also answers accusations that our guest is throwing here and there to credible human rights organizations that are working to improve human rights. So he has no doubts about the intentions of the U.S.
What did you improve? Can you tell me what did you improve?
Requirements for supply.
Could you tell me what did you manage to improve?
What do you mean?
What did you manage to improve in human rights? People are slaughtered every day in Palestine. Have you managed to improve anything? Can you talk to Israel?
Sir,
can any human rights organization talk to Israel? They will tell you to go to hell. Yeah, no way.
Okay.
Yes,
no
we
way.
have a big battle right
friend,
now
I know
in the
this fund
Israelis
coming back.
because they
you
want to
will
throw
have a lot
out
of
our
material
researcher
to
from the
increase your
country.
fund, and you will have all
We
the
improved
reason to
many
ask people to
situations,
fund
sir.
you more. You are earning your living, my friend. You are earning your living. I am not earning my
we
living.
work
I'm a
in 90
volunteer for my
countries in the
country.
world.
You run
Okay.
away from your country
Gentlemen,
to build a
I'm
human
gonna have
rights
to-
organization. That's all.
I'm going to have to interrupt you there.
Thank you.
And very unfortunately, we're out of
Thank you.
time for this segment of the Newsmakers. There's so much more to discuss, I know, but I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us.
Jean-Pierre Bemba is a true compatriot, and therefore we have come here to say to Jean-Pierre Bemba that the Congolese loved him yesterday, that the Congolese love him today, and that his presence here was important so that together we can build the future differently.
Opposition leader and former vice president of the Democratic Republic of Congo has returned home after spending a decade in prison. Jean-Pierre Bemba left the DRC in 2007 and has been imprisoned at The Hague ever since. Now, in May, his war crimes convictions were overturned by the International Criminal Court, and now he is expected to challenge the country's longtime president, Joseph Kabila. But the ruling coalition said last week Bemba is disqualified from running because he still has another conviction for witness tampering on his record. But could Bemba's supporters still propel him to power? Well, to discuss Bemba's return and what's ahead for the DRC, I'm joined now from Leicester in the UK by Michael Chibangu. He is the president of the Association for Development and Democracy in Congo. And in Dakar, Senegal, we have Fred Bauma. He is a human rights activist and a member of the Struggle for Change, a nonviolent and nonpartisan civil society movement. Thanks both so much for joining us. Let me begin in the UK with Michael. Legally, constitutionally, can Bemba run for president?
Well, that becomes a question of interpretation. As you have just mentioned earlier, Bemba has been acquitted of the main charges, which was dealing with war crimes and crimes against humanity. However, there's still a second case, which he was found guilty of witness tampering. However, legally speaking, witness tampering is not equal in DRC as corruption. For him to be ineligible, he will have to be guilty of corruption. And obviously, or else in The Hague, he will say that he bribed some witnesses to testify for him. And in terms of the word, but he wasn't found guilty of corruption, he was found guilty of witness tampering. So there are some difference in terms of semantic, and that's where the problem will lie, is what interpretation the court will give, whether the court will think that he is indeed liable for corruption, or witness tampering is a different charge to that one of corruption.
Okay. So, Fred, let me ask you, would Bemba's return to politics, if allowed, be a good thing for the DRC?
I think in general, any Congolese who like to do politics should be allowed to do it. Do I think it will be a good thing for Congo politics? I think it will add diversity. But in terms of quality of the Congo politics itself, I don't think it will add something substantial. But Bemba is one of the main opponents since since the end of the war, and I think for him to be back in the country in general, it's something very good. But it doesn't add anything substantial in terms of the quality of the Congo politics, or in terms of what they offer.
Okay.
I hope he can new projects and new ideas.
Okay, so if you think it wouldn't be necessarily beneficial, do you think it could be detrimental to Congolese politics, given that he is a former warlord?
Well, I don't think it will also be detrimental to Congo politics. I think he was brought to the courts, but I think there are many who could have been at his place and even being found guilty where he was acquitted. So I think for me, on a human rights activist point of view, it's just natural. It doesn't add something, and it doesn't destroy anything. Okay. It remains the same. It adds just the debate.
Okay. So that sounds very neutral coming from Fred, Michael, but let me ask you, I mean, How concerned should the Congolese public be that his return will prove very controversial? We know the ruling party will fight him contesting this election, but could it propel the DRC into dangerous territory?
Well, it shouldn't do. I mean, Bemba has been acquitted, and obviously he has not been found guilty of charges of corruption, which would mean that he will be ineligible. So he should be able to run, and it should be up to the Congolese people to decide whether he is the man for them or whether he is not. So this is not it is not up to the ruling party to prevent him from running. And I think that if they try to prevent him, then we might have some conflict and maybe more tension. It is worth remembering that Bemba went into exile after fighting erupted in Kinshasa between his troop and the troops of Kabila, the President Kabila, who is actually in power. So I think they should let him run and let the people decide. Let the people make that call through free and fair and credible elections.
Okay, Michael, but I mean, other than Jean-Pierre Bemba's irregularities, his record of witness tampering that still hasn't been overturned, there are some other very serious irregularities in the lead up to the next election. Joseph Kabila himself, he was supposed to be out of office back in 2016, but he's still there, still waiting for another election, which were already postponed twice. And he has not ruled out running again for president, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is in clear violation of the DRC's constitutional term limits. Is that good for the country?
Absolutely. For the past, Kabila, as you have mentioned, mandate ended in 2016, and elections should have been held before the end of his mandate constitutionally. So he has been delaying election and using all kind of tricks in order to stay in power. He has managed to get 2 extra years, and we think that that's enough, and it has to go, and elections should be held without him. And obviously, so far, he has not said explicitly that he will not be running again. However, the Constitution does not give him that option. The Constitution of DRC is very clear in terms of the number of mandates that he can run, and he has reached the 2 maximum limits. And the Constitution also makes it clear that the provision with regard to constitutional term limit cannot be amended by any way. So illegally, Kabila cannot stand. So we are hoping that in the coming days that he will not run, and his camp will choose another person to run, and let Congolese people choose, and let the law be respected.
Okay, Fred Bauma, what do you think is the likelihood of that Joseph Kabila will not run again, that elections will be allowed to proceed fairly and peacefully, perhaps with Jean-Pierre Bemba contesting this?
I think there is no way to think that the election will be proceed fairly and credibly. I think the level of corruption of this electoral process is very high, and it's difficult to think that you can have a credible election anymore. However, I think Kabila may appoint probably someone to run at his place, but his majority has made it clear that they will do all they can to make sure Kabila remain the leader of Congo politics before, during, and after the electoral process. So I think even if he appoints someone to run at his place, he will make all possible to make sure he is the one running beside.
And I mean, Fred, sadly, is that kind of the best the DRC can do at this point? Are there any real political alternatives? And I mean, is any candidate really actually interested in bringing an end to the ethnic and tribal rivalries that exist in the DRC that keep the country returning to conflict?
I think many of the candidates may do better than Kabila did during the 17 last year. I don't think there will be among all those who are willing to run, there is anyone who may be the best candidate, but I think many of them can definitely be better than Kabila in terms of bringing back security, in terms of guaranteeing basic need, and in terms of respecting basic human rights.
Oh, go ahead, Michael Shabangu.
Indeed, as it has been mentioned there, I think the main thing here is the respect of the rule of law in DRC. What we have seen over the past few years is somebody that is trying to cling to power by any means necessary, and is also trying to prevent other people from who he sees as challenges from running. You have mentioned here that they say that Bemba cannot run, when it is not the role of a politician to decide who should run. We have the Electoral Commission. We also have the Constitutional Court, who have the mandate to obviously assess the eligibility of the various candidates. But here we've seen not just Bemba, but we also have Moise Katumbi, another candidate who has been forced into exile. This has become a very worrying pattern, and what we fear is that they're just going to organize another sham election, and which is only going to push DRC further into chaos and instability, and that is very worrying, because this country has seen a lot of trouble, a lot of this humanitarian crisis that is ongoing, and this will only make the situation on the ground even worse, and the conflict could spread regionally and also affect the neighbors in terms of the number of displaced and refugees and other people like that. So it is deeply concerning, and something has to be done, and elections have to be inclusive and credible to avoid chaos in DRC.
And how confident are you that that can happen, a credible, transparent election to avert further violence in the crisis you just talked about?
Unfortunately, we've not seen any signs that will indicate that Kabila is ready to hold organized, credible election. Because when Kabila mandate ended in 2016, an agreement was signed, and as part of that agreement, political prisoners were supposed to be released, and that has not been done. And politicians who have been forced into exile, like Moise Katumbi and many more, were supposed to return. That has not happened, and we see that Kabila has not at all respected the agreement that gave him another year to stay in power. So all this, what we're seeing is crackdown increasing. So is not really creating a climate that is conducive to free and fair and inclusive election in DRC. And what we have is a crisis of legitimacy, which can only be resolved by holding free and fair and inclusive election. Failing to do that will mean more chaos, more violence on the streets of DRC.
Okay, Michael Chibongu, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you the last word there, because we are completely out of time for this segment. I'd like to thank both of our guests so much for joining us. That's all for this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching. Goodbye.